Welcome to Alaska Weather, a production of Alaska Public Media and the National Weather Service, Alaska Region. Produced and broadcast daily from the studios of KAKM, Alaska Weather provides complete forecasts, public, marine, and aviation for all of Alaska. Alaska Weather is made possible by the following sponsors.
The National Weather Service.
Good evening, everyone, and thanks so much for joining us for this Saturday's edition of Alaska Weather. I'm meteorologist Dave Percy, and I'll be hosting today's show. Up on the hazardous weather graphic, we've got a wind advisory out for the eastern Alaska range here, but that's west of the Tote Cutoff, and that's for those winds gusting to 55 miles an hour, and that is out through noon Sunday, from this evening through noon Sunday. And winter weather advisories out here for the Yukon-Kuskokwim Delta for snow and blowing snow in these areas, winds gusting maybe 50 miles an hour or so, give or take. And that extends on up there across the eastern Norton Sound area along the south coast. And then that becomes a warning out there for St. Lawrence Island and the Bering Strait coast. Blizzard warning, blizzard warning for that. For St. Lawrence Island, the Bering Strait coast, that's until 7 a.m. Monday, starting again about sometime later this evening. For northeast winds, 65 miles an hour, 2 to 4 inches of snow, and that will create near zero visibilities at times. Same thing going on here for the Portage Valley to Turnagain Pass area. That starts this evening, a winter storm warning for those areas. Could see 7 to 12 inches of snow with winds gusting possibly as high as 65 miles an hour. Now create near zero visibilities and, of course, pretty low or hard, difficult driving conditions along the Seward Highway, with actually even maybe some localized areas could see as much as 16 inches of snow. Moving on to the satellite imagery, we've got, here's all the moisture coming up that's going to be bringing the winter storm warnings, blizzard warnings, and wind advisories and winter weather advisories to these areas. Already pushing a fair amount of moisture in across the southwest interior, especially over the Alaska Peninsula. Wind, rain, Kodiak Island today, back along the west there, southwest to Sand Point, and then just a little bit of rain over at the Unalaska area, with the colder air way back to the west here and the northwest. And we've got high clouds moving in across the central interior, and a disturbance right along the moving eastward here up to the north. Kind of still a circulation there. One weak trough bringing some light snow in across the eastern North Slope, Arctic coastal areas, and then some more flurries and light snow back to the west along the western coastline. Otherwise, the southeast coast today, still pretty good conditions. A few clouds showing up in some areas here along the coast. Sitka on up to the north there, and a little bit of light snow fell in Yakutat for a period of time today, but still mostly dry conditions and lighter on the winds though. For, you can see just a really weakening band of cirrus there dissipating as it approaches the coast. Otherwise, a much thicker cirrus shield here spreading in over south central Alaska, the edge right through here, and then some banding of the higher clouds into the interior. And that system up there to the north really just bringing a few skiffs of snow to the eastern Alaska range, or the eastern Brooks Range around Arctic Village. And then all this southeast flow looking for some moisture to increase. Actually today again we had snow falling across western Prince William Sound, to a lesser extent for the North Gulf Coast, and back down toward Seward, picking up snow, beginning to mix around the Seldovia area. Just plain rain this afternoon at Kodiak Island. Bristol Bay, King Salmon, downsloping winds, not seeing any precipitation, but temperatures up around 40 degrees, and areas of rain that become showery behind the front across the Alaska Peninsula to the eastern Aleutians. And snow and blowing snow developing this afternoon for the Yukon-Kuskokwim Delta here, and also picking up there for St. Lawrence Island. Winds gusting about 45 miles an hour, both at Gamble and Savunga, with visibilities at times down to about half a mile in the snow and blowing snow there. Better conditions the Bering Strait, but you'll be coming down too, and the flurries up here to the north of that slowly exiting weak system there over the Arctic. And for tonight, just a weak trailing edge is all there will be here on the eastern Arctic coast there for clouds, flurries, fog, reducing visibilities, better conditions down to the south, fair here in the eastern interior with temperatures falling well below zero, maybe 30 to 40 below again, North Waitok area, possibly up toward the Yukon Flats. Otherwise, snow blowing, snow increasing. Prince William Sound area, especially that warning zone from Turnagain Pass to Portage Valley. Same thing going on here, snow on the increase, eastern slopes of the western Alaska Range. Snow and blowing snow advisories out for the Yukon-Kuskokwim Delta. And again, that warning will be kicking in for St. Lawrence Island. Rain and wind, in fact, storm warnings out tonight, Shelikof Strait, the Kodiak Island zones, the Barrens, all in storm warnings for tonight as this front pushes in, that gradient tightens up, but less wind back to the west here. But another band of rain swinging into the eastern Aleutians with that 972 millibar low that's north of the area. Rain changing to showers over the Pribilofs, and colder air trying to seep southward here, coming in on winds that aren't all that strong, a little gusty, but rain and snow showers back over the western central Aleutians. Forecast for Sunday, again, until noon, we've got the high wind advisory for those winds 55 miles an hour in the Alaska Range. One surge of moisture lifting northward here. Could bring a few flurries, areas of light snow in along the Brooks Range, especially from the Brooks Range southward there, Koyukuk Valley, maybe some little bit of light snow, but the heavier weather back out to the west here, Seward Peninsula, Bering Strait Coast, St. Lawrence Island, into the Yukon Delta, Kuskokwim Delta, probably starting to improve a little bit there. Could mix out in the precipitation. Bristol Bay definitely. Rain, Kodiak Island, but lighter on the winds. And this front edging in toward the southeast coast, we'll see the next day brings rain with a warm front here in across all the panhandle. Big change coming up there. Could start out as snow in areas or some mixed precipitation, but definitely south to north flow here, changing over toward the rain type by throughout the afternoon hours. Rain, North Gulf Coast, pretty good winds here. Again, picking up Kodiak Island, the Barrens there, into Cook Inlet, some light snow, mostly along the upslope areas. And not so much better conditions. Could see some clearing over the Yukon Delta. And back to the west, another system bringing colder air, rain and snow showers, gusty northwest winds, central Aleutians. Temperatures lows tonight, again, down to near 40 below in the North Waitok area, 25 to 35 below Yukon Flats, below zero Arctic Coast North Slope. Under mild southerly conditions here, upper 30s, Kodiak Island and Bristol Bay and the Alaska Peninsula, lower 30s out to the west. And for the southeast coast, single numbers to near zero, or a little above here to maybe 15. And then for highs tomorrow, 20s to mid 30s in that area. Lower 30s here for the south central Alaska zone, but lower 40s roughly from about Seldovia down to Kodiak. Lower 40s in across all of Bristol Bay, all the way up to Iliamna. And a little bit cooler, but still near 40 out along the Alaska Peninsula, upper 30s for the eastern Aleutians, mid 30s for the central Aleutians, staying below zero here over the eastern interior and the Arctic coast and the North Slope. Into the teens here for Kotzebue Sound, 20s, mid 20s for the Seward Peninsula, Southside White Mountain, Denome, on over to Savunga and Gamble. And then the lows for Monday morning. First day of the year, New Year's Day, for about 26 below for the 40-mile country over here, 8 below for Eagle, and definitely staying below zero up there for the North Slope and the Arctic coast. And that, I believe, is Battles at 2 below with Tanana at 1 above. So the 0-degree isotherm starting to pull back to the north. Lower 20s here, south side of the Seward Peninsula, 20s to near 30 for the southwest coastal areas, southwest interior, mild out over the Aleutians, and milder for the southeast coast. Looking at the highs the next day, mid 30s to mid 40s, warming south to north here throughout the day with snow changing to rain. Lower 40s, south central Alaska, southern Kenai Peninsula, and below zero in the north.
And now, aviation weather around Alaska.
Rolling into the aviation section here, a lot of IFR off the west coast here, the southwest coast, Norton Sound, on back into the central Bering there, down to the Pribilofs, and then on in toward, but not quite reaching Kuskokwim Bay tomorrow morning, but in across the southwest mountains there, Kilbrook Range, and some band IFR up here from the Nulato Hills, on up toward the Selawik Valley there, marginal VFR across the Kobuk Valley into the North Slope. IFR on the increase, western Prince William Sound, southern coast of the Kenai Peninsula, eastern slopes of the western Alaska Range. Staying VFR for the southeast coast. Tomorrow afternoon, some of that marginal condition slips on in Port Alexander on up definitely for Elfin Cove, and then a ways inland there, with that extending back to the west here across all of the Gulf of Alaska. IFR Prince William Sound, a little more extensive there. Looks like covering about the whole area, even Valdez. And IFR here still along the eastern slopes of the western Alaska Range. And moisture is starting to lift northward here. Marginal VFR, Brooks Range North Slope. IFR down along the Yukon Delta coast, mostly back to the northwest there across St. Lawrence Island, lifting north of the Pribilofs now. And some VFR breaking out over the western Aleutians. And then for, let's see, Monday morning, got a surge of moisture lifts northward Sunday night. IFR lining up along and south of the Brooks Range there, with marginal to the north, marginal to the south, VFR in between. And then south side of the Alaska Range here, IFR now over toward the Windy Pass area, all the way down along the Aleutian Range, Kodiak marginal. IFR continuing there, North Gulf Coast, east side of the Kenai Peninsula, and a lot of IFR back into the replacing the VFR over the southeast coast. And for the afternoon, that kind of improves the marginal over much of the panhandle there, but IFR persists toward the border and up Lynn Canal Glacier Bay area. IFR still hanging on to the North Gulf Coast into Prince William Sound. Up across the Talkeetnas, Cook Inlet's the Sitna Valley, northern Cook Inlet, still in the VFR. Areas of VFR over the interior, especially out here to the west, marginal up to the north and northeast. Out west, IFR here down to the Alaska Peninsula from about Cape Newenham. And this area retreating back, becoming less of a factor, but still catching St. Lawrence and St. Matthew Islands. Marginal VFR, Bering Sea and Aleutians. Passes Anatuvik marginal tomorrow, same forecast for Adigan, marginal VFR. And for the Lake Clark and Merrill passes, marginal VFR, but definitely look for IFR on both eastern entrances there. That same pattern holds for Rainy as well. Lowest conditions on the east entrance, probably likely VFR, or likely IFR, and VFR would be over in the valley. And for Windy, marginal VFR, pass and south VFR into the Tanana Valley. And for Isabel, marginal VFR. Mentasta, VFR, basically a chance of marginal VFR, especially into the later part of the afternoon there on the eastern entrance. And for Tanita, VFR with some marginal VFR possible on the eastern entrance there later in the day. And then for Portage, marginal VFR with the lowest conditions, IFR on the eastern entrance. I don't think it'll be low IFR, but IFR about sums it up with a little bit better off to the west. And then for Chilcoot and White, VFR. Looking at freezing levels, not much to see here. We got 2,000 feet up across Kodiak Island, Shelikof Strait at the surface here. Bering Sea across Kuskokwim Bay, North Gulf Coast, and then on down the Panhandle. And then for icing, southeast flow, enhanced terrain could produce some considerable moderate rime icing below, above about 5,000 feet here along the Prince William Sound, Kenai Peninsula, also back toward the Alaska Range. Areas of lighter, less significant icing to the southwest here, a little more extensive back to St. Lawrence Island, but out over the western Bering. And moving on to the jet stream. Actually, we've got a pretty good jet coming westerlies across the Pacific here. Energizes with this northwest branch linking up there, 150 knots, and then it diverges along 150 to 55 west with one branch southeast 90 just off the southeast coast, southeast 70 over the southwest interior, 9,000 feet southeast 30 to 50 knots here, Kodiak Island Peninsula, southwest interior, coming back around but only 20 to 25 over the Aleutians, southeast 40 knots right into south central Alaska, 50 knots across the Kenai Peninsula at 3,000 feet here, right out of the Gulf there into the interior, pretty strong with right out to the coastline there with that system just to the west, much lighter over the Panhandle and up to the north and northeast, and northerlies 25 over the Aleutians. Turbulence, widespread areas of moderate chop, pretty likely here, Prince William Sound down the Alaska Peninsula on up to the northwest across the Seward Peninsula.
We have cleaned over 1,500 miles of shoreline now.
Basically, it comes down to just human muscle. I mean, we use chainsaws and knives.
We find stuff from like Russia and China and Korea, Vietnam, Malaysia. It really doesn't matter where it comes from. We all just have to clean it up.
Our goal right now in the next 10 or 11 days before the end of this year is just to see how much we can collect before we get to remove it.
What you see on the beach is a fraction of what's out there. You can pretty much break it down into 3 or 4 things. Water bottles, a lot of water bottles, styrofoam, fishing nets, fishing buoys. And that's 99% of what you find on the beach. Basically just go along with chainsaws and muscle and get the garbage, put it in sacks, and then from there we haul it up above the log jam so it's out of any heavy surf or winter storms if it's going to stay there for the year, and put it in super sacks. So yeah, we just progressively work down the coast, just day in and day out.
We have like daily goals for ourselves that, like, if we're working at a pretty good rate, we'd like to keep on pace with about, like, I don't know, about 20 to 25 super sacks a day. So this is pile 102, and in this pile right now we have 2 super sacks and 1 set of buoys. June 23rd here, this is what we've done today. We're up to 25 super sacks on the day, and I think for now we'll call it and just keep cleaning until tomorrow.
My name is Hannah, and I represent a organization in Japan called Japan Environmental Action Network. With over 20 people working together to clean up the beach, this is amazing. Like, we all need to work together to, clean up the beach as much as possible. So like every single time I go back to Japan, I talk to the fishermen, and the fishermen's like, it's a joke, but they're like, if you find any buoy with my logo, you gotta bring it back, and it's like, always looking out for that stuff.
The crew's awesome. I mean, we're all skiers or snowboarders, and we're all friends. I mean, we're all good friends. My dad started it. He's the man behind the desk. He makes the ball roll for sure. He works hard. He doesn't give up easy, which is good.
This stuff is uplifted quite a ways during the earthquake. Well, I think my bag's about full already. Yeah. I'm gonna take a quick look back in here. Somebody else is back here. The thing about marine debris is it's kind of a hidden problem. Unless you're out there, especially on these remote beaches that are so heavily impacted, people don't see it. I remember probably a good 20 years ago, I was out on the outside of Montague Island, flew out there, and I was just utterly astounded by all the garbage out there. You walk out there and you wade through this stuff and you go, this isn't right, this shouldn't happen.
I think a lot of it's just awareness. I mean, I've been boating out here for a long time, and I wasn't even aware of how extensive the marine debris problem is out here, but it's a consumer world out there for sure. I mean, I don't know where people's values are, I guess, but mine is you got to kind of have a little bit of respect for the environment, and considering we live in it, especially in Alaska. I mean, a lot of people like the outdoors and like to be part of the outdoors. That's why they live here, and it's they don't necessarily want to see it trashed.
And now, marine weather around Alaska.
Welcome back. Sea ice analysis done here Saturday. Norton Sound, or actually all along the Bering Sea coast here, ice progressing westward and coming southward here with those northerly winds over the Chukchi Sea. So, and also to the west, so beginning to pinch off here, and it'll probably have some ice in this whole area. We'll have some concentration of ice or coverage by the end of the next 4 or 5 days. Moving on to the marine forecast, southeast 30 knots, south coast, southeast 35 knots, minimum gales there on the north coast, up to 40 even farther east there. Seas 13 to 17 feet, otherwise 11 to 12 feet. Southeast 20 knots for Clarence Strait, and north 20 knots, but gusts, gale force gusts for Stevens Passage tomorrow. Lynn Canal, though, down to just 25 knots with 5-foot seas. And the outlook for Monday, southeast 25, Clarence Strait with 6-foot seas, southeast to 20 for Stevens Passage, and winds going south at 15 for a change for Lynn Canal Glacier Bay with 4-foot seas. South winds 20 to 25 on the south coast with those 14-foot seas, and 30-knot southerlies on the north coast with seas up to 16 feet. And heading to the west here, Prince William Sound. East 30 knots, 7-foot seas tomorrow. Northeast 30 for Northern Cook Inlet, 10-foot seas still in the forecast. 40-knot northeasterlies here south of the Forelands. Southern Cook Inlet, pretty good gale, 14-foot seas. Storms tonight and tomorrow there for the Kachemak Bay area. Storms tonight and tomorrow for the Barren Islands with 23-foot seas. Storms extending along the western North Gulf Coast. East 45 knots here for the eastern North Gulf Coast, 20-foot seas. And that holds on the wind. Seas come down a little bit, but east 45, 16-foot seas there for the eastern North Gulf Coast. 40-knot winds here for the west side. 30 knots, no change there for Prince William Sound. Northeast 30, Cook Inlet. 45 knots for the Barren Islands. 50 knots, storm warnings still go next couple of days there for the Kachemak Bay area. And 35 knots south of the Forelands. Bristol Bay, southeast 30 tomorrow. South to southeast, 25 to 30 here for the peninsula. And 16-foot seas there on the Bering Sea side. 40-knot southerlies there, east side of Kodiak Island. Southeast 40 for Shelikof Strait, 23-foot seas. And for the next day, Monday, southeast 40 to 20-foot seas there on the east side of Kodiak. East 45, Shelikof Strait with 17-foot seas. 45-knot winds here, Sitkinak to Castle Cape, turn northeast at 40 for the entire Alaska Peninsula. And east 40 for Bristol Bay. Aleutians, south to southwest 20 knots on Alaska Island, Fox Islands. Northwest 20 to 25 here for the central Aleutians, going more northerly out west, still about 25 knots. And then for Monday, West-northwest 30 knots in these western zones. Westerlies, Adak and Atka 25. And basically west, if you average it out here for the Fox Islands, 25 to 30 knots with seas 8 to 15 feet. And for tonight, or for tomorrow here on the southwest coast, south of Nunivak Island, southeast 30 knots, east 35, 10-foot seas there, north of Nunivak Island, northeast 40 for St. Matthew Island, and west east 15 for the Perbolos, much lighter there, northeast 45 knots there for St. Lawrence Island. And then for the Monday forecast, 40-knot winds now south of Nunivak Island, 25 north side, St. Lawrence Island coming down to east 30 knots, northeast at 30 for St. Matthew Island, light winds for the Perbolofs. And for the eastern Beaufort Sea coast, west 10 knots, ice covered all through this area, so 20-knot winds out of the northeast, pick up to gale force Cape Beaufort, on down to Cape Thompson to the Bering Strait, northeast 30 with 8-foot seas. And for Monday's outlook, east 20 in that zone. Gale force winds Cape Thompson to Cape Beaufort, east 30 there for the west side, coming down to 15 in the central coast, picking up on the eastern Beaufort Sea coast. East-northeast, 20 to 25 knots, strongest here toward demarcation point. And then for tonight, again, this front bringing milder conditions, much wetter weather. Wind advisories for the Alaska Range southeast, 55 miles an hour in gusts west of the Tote Cutoff. And winter weather advisories, Yukon, Kuskokwim Delta, snow and blowing snow 2 to 4 inches, and a blizzard warning out for St. Lawrence Island later tonight through Monday morning for near zero visibilities in snow and blowing snow, 2 to 4 inches expected there. Areas of snow and blowing snow here coming into south central Alaska, mostly western Prince William Sound up to Turnagain Pass, and rain with the milder conditions. Bristol Bay, gusty winds again, that strong wind storm warnings ahead of that front there for Kodiak Island. And for Sunday, everything nudging northward, but staying cold and dry up over the east and northeast. And then on Monday, it looks like the Panhandle will get in on some precipitation. Thanks for joining us.
These forecasts are to be used for planning purposes only. Call 1-800-WX-BRIEF for a formal pre-flight briefing. Always file a flight plan before you go flying. The U.S. Coast Guard Auxiliary urges you to leave a float plan with a friend or the harbor master before you go boating. Alaska Weather is made possible by the following sponsors.
The National Weather Service.